Hello, buddy. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the tier list for patch 12.13. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. If you enjoy the content and you want to see some more, be sure to check out the rest of the offerings as well. I'm going to be doing an ADC tier list also, and then I'll see if I can do some of the other tier lists as well, and I'll do a patch preview about midway through next week once we get some numbers on what they're going to be doing on the next patch. And come by, check out the stream also. We've been streaming usually starting around 10 or 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going till about 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community. We'd love to see you. Let's come on out and hang out with us. Okay. Let's go ahead and get in here. So not a lot has changed, I don't think, since the last patch. A couple of things have shuffled around. There have been a few sort of up-and-comers, but let's just start off with S tier. And if this is one of the first tier lists you've seen with me, the way that I think about it is B is perfectly playable, which I see is kind of average. You can definitely win some games with it. A, I would say, is above average. So if you have decent experience on a champion and the matchups kind of make sense, I think it's going to be stronger than average. And then S is good. It's blind pickable usually, and it's good in a wide variety of matchups. In most cases with fairly limited experience, with the exception of maybe Rakan. But it's going to be strong in a lot of different situations. We'll talk about Rakan, of course, because that's borderline my one trick on the channel. But that's just kind of how I think of it. And then C is just kind of below average. You can still win games with them, but they're kind of working uphill in terms of the meta. And I'm really looking at it from like the silver to platinum sort of bracket. So if you're playing in iron or bronze, it might look a little different. Obviously in pro play or challenger, it's going to look a little different. But anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get in here. So I think that Renata is probably the strongest right now overall. And a lot of this is just a nod to her having an extremely high pick rate and a really high win rate. A lot of the items favor her as well. Items and runes that have sort of changed in priority over time. So Shirelia's still remains one of the best support items. They have nerfed some of the other enchanter items. They've nerfed healing and shielding to some extent. Although they also did nerf Grievous Wound, so you will still see some enchanters that are strong up here. Now they are nerfing enchanters a little bit more next patch. They're nerfing all the Forbidden Idol items and Moonstone, so stay tuned. We'll see, what happens there. But for now, Shirelia's remains one of the strongest items. So anyone that can get a Shirelia's comfortably as a support is probably going to be in a pretty good place. And the thing about Shirelia's is there are so many meatball type of champions right now that are just really good if they have the movement speed to get on people and dive. So, like, you got your Wukong, you got your Volibear, Diana, Camille. The list just kind of goes on. So the name of the game is just to enhance that mobility and really just get people in there and get those fights going. And it's not only the active, it's really that motivate passive as well, which can be very nice, where it's going to speed up both you and your ally for that 25% for a second and a half. And that may not seem like much, but it definitely adds up, particularly on champions who have multiple ways to trigger that, or can, trigger it really rapid fire or trigger it on multiple allies at once. There are a lot of different ways you can use that, but really strong item. So she's one of the better users of that. And then her kit is just a really good balance with a lot of everything else going on in the meta. She does have an engage with her Q, so it's not the greatest in the world because it does have fairly limited range and a pretty thin hitbox, but it doesn't have much wind-up time, so you can just throw it out there pretty quickly, kind of like a Nautilus hook. It can go over walls, unlike Nautilus, and you have a little bit of extra play with it. Whenever you hit the person, then you can move it and hit somebody else. So you can get a full second and a half route / stun if you knock someone into somebody else. And it can do some potential AoE damage as well, right? So it doesn't just do the 260. It goes into someone else. And I think it can only hit one other person, but I'm not sure. You might be able to stun multiple people with it. But it's pretty good damage at 260. And now it does have a long cooldown, and that's kind of the theme with Renata, is that a lot of her abilities are quite a long cooldown, but they're almost... In fact, they are all pretty high impact. So she doesn't really have a dead ability. Like, they're all good. but the Q is typically what you'll just put 1 point in. Then you have your W, and this is kind of a mix of Lulu and Zillion to some extent, so it does give a really nice buff to the movement speed and attack speed. Up to 60% attack speed is really good. I think that Whimsy off of Lulu caps out at like 45%. I think it's 35% movement speed and 45% attack speed. It might even be lower than that. But 60% is a lot. And they get the 20% movement speed, and it lasts for 5 seconds, which is quite a long time. And if the person dies while this is on them, then they basically come back as a zombie for a temporary amount of time. And then if there's a kill or an assist that that person's a part of, then they get fully resurrected. And it's only on when you max it out, like a 24-second cooldown. So it's really, really good. It's a steroid and it's a revive. So quite a strong ability. Then you have your E, which is really nice trading ability, and they keep nerfing if you've kept up with the patches. And I don't remember on this patch exactly what they've nerfed, but they keep nerfing a lot of the healing and shielding. So they've nerfed Janna. It was as high as 240, I think, in recent memory with the shield. It's now down to 175. Next patch is going down to 165 on a single target shield that decays, where if it breaks, you lose a lot of your power because you lose the 50 AD or so that you're giving somebody. So this is on about the same cooldown when you max it out at 10%, but it's 185, so it's already more than Janna, and it's AoE. Like, it's guaranteed to shield you and well, it's not guaranteed to shield the one person that you hit, but if you have hands, like, you're going to be able to hit one person with it. So it's going to shield you, anyone around you, in the circle around you it shields, and where, as it travels, that line that it travels in, anyone there it's going to shield, and it's going to damage anyone in the process, and it explodes where you have it land, it's going to shield anyone there, and it's going to damage anyone there. All on one ability, so it does 185, oh, actually, I'm sorry, messed that up. Pretend you didn't hear that. 185 damage, only 110 shield. But the fact that it's basically guaranteed to shield 2 people for effectively 220 base with 100% AP ratio is massive. And it lasts for 3 seconds, which is about how long a Janna shield's going to last, or less, if it gets broken. So, because it decays and all that stuff. And it slows for 2 seconds, 30% non-decay. So it's just a really, really powerful team fight. Like, even just trading in lane, if you just stand next to your ADC, throw this out so you both get the shield and then you damage somebody, like, that's pretty good trading. So, really strong there. And then, of course, her ult is basically a 1.25 seconds taunt. Now, it doesn't have any base damage, but people do damage to themselves. And, I mean, that's cool that, like, people are sort of killing themselves. Obviously, very good against the super fed, Master Yi or Vayne or, something like that. But really just the 1.25 second. And this is a massive hitbox too. This like takes up almost an entire lane. Like, it's huge. It's fairly slow moving. It's very similar like a Maokai ult in that, or like a Nami wave in that sense. But really high impact ultimate. Pretty long cooldown, but really high impact. So overall, just a really well-balanced champion. She has engage. She has a steroid. She has like really good utility. With the resurrection, with the shielding, the damage, the slows. She's a really good champ. I might actually consider playing her a little bit more, but she's been tied for Rakan as the most powerful support in all regions in Pro on this patch, and in solo queue, she has some of the highest play rate and one of the highest win rates of any supports. So, she's pretty good at all levels of play. So yeah, definitely consider picking up Renata, and I have not seen her on the chopping block for next patch either. I haven't seen that much that would affect her. I think they might be nerfing Guardian a little bit, but that could still be good. A big thing, you like Font of Life with her, because you have so many ways you can trigger it on multiple people with your slow, and then obviously your ult, your Q, and then combining that with something like Ardent Sensor or Staff of Flowing Water. Now, those items are getting nerfed, so we'll just kind of see how that shakes out a little bit. But honestly, she doesn't have that much plus healing and shielding. Like, I'm not sure if she even cares that much. Like, yes, her shield, we talked about that, but like, not much else does the plus healing and shielding, kind of like Lulu, so she's not as affected by those changes as other enchanters are. She really just wants this buff more than anything else, because she spreads it around so easily. So I don't think losing 2% plus healing and shielding is going to matter too much for her. So yeah, I think she's going to be in pretty good shape moving forward if you want to try to learn her now for the next few patches, because it looks like most other enchanters are going to get hit harder than her. Okay, Seraphine, still going to be pretty strong. She did take a couple of hits on this patch. I don't remember. Here, let me just pull it up. I can't honestly even remember, because I feel like this patch was just pretty inconsequential for supports. Outside of just like what works well with Sivir, and I think both of these champions do. I think Sivir's just really independent. Like she does have some synergies, but like with Sivir and Neela, I mean they've been two of the biggest stories on this patch in bottom lane, and I think that Renata and a lot of these other champs all work pretty well. So Neela does work particularly well with Rakan. We'll talk about that in a second, but anyways, I don't think there were that many specific support ones. I know, I guess, shout out to Tiny. They did buff Elise a little bit. He was like, please put Elise on the support tier list. I'm not going to do it because one team in Korea played her like one game. But if people do want to play Elise, go for it, I guess. But I'll say that there just because Tiny wanted me to say it. He's a mod on the channel if you don't watch the live stream. But yeah, there wasn't that much on this patch, honestly, that shook up support too much. These, the masks being able to stack is really nice for Brand and Zyra. We'll talk about that in a second. But now you can have multiple people with masks on your team. Because before, it would just refresh the duration, but not stack. So it was actually quite bad for your DPS if multiple people were running this item. And particularly Demonic Embrace has been very popular with several champions who want to run like Demonic plus Sunfire. Or, of course, you can run the classic Demonic plus Leandries. Yeah, there's pretty much nothing for most mainstream supports on this one. So this is kind of just a carryover from last patch. There have been some, some kind of shifts in itemization and some discoveries of new builds and things like that, which we'll talk about in a second. But Seraphine got hit last patch, I guess, a little bit. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but she's still very good. Oh yeah. They nerfed her her E from a 1.5 second stun. They hot nerfed it, I guess, last patch. From a 1.5 second to a 1.25 second. And that did bring her down a little bit. Like, she's down 2 or 3%. But I still think she's really good. Like, and I don't like Seraphine as an ADC in solo queue. I've had her on my team several times. I just think you need to play a harder carry. Now, in pro, maybe it works a little bit. Maybe it doesn't with some comps. But I don't really like her as ADC. I think she's okay mid if you have enough stuff to play around her. And I think she's okay, like, actually good as support. Particularly with a pushing lane. But overall, as ADC, I'm not too impressed. But as support, you have really nice harassment and wave clear early on with the Q. So she would complement Sivir very well. Because she can just set it up, with her Q. Just kind of lower the HP a little bit, then Sivir just cleans it up with all of her AoE. So great with a pushing comp, Sivir, Jen, Misfortune. Just a lot of these kind of harass and push comps are going to be really good with her. And then she transitions later, and I've seen more and more people maxing this W second instead of the E. You're going to do less damage, but it does have a pretty nice AoE shield up to 130, and it's a huge hitbox. So you can definitely put it on at least 2 or 3 people in a team fight, if not your entire team, depending on the positioning. And then you also get to restore a certain percentage of missing health. So pretty good utility. Really nice long range, so you can stand pretty far back. And I think that makes her a lot different than Sona. I know people were memeing on her being Sona 2.0. She plays very, very different. Well, not like very differently. It's not like Nautilus versus Sona, right? But it's pretty different, right? She has a lot more range in her trading. I don't even know if I'm wearing this, honestly. Let's take this out. Like, why am I wearing the headphones? I'm not listening to anything. Just kind of habit, I guess. But anyways, long range, good wave clear, good sort of powerful yet long cooldown on the W. Now, people are going Moonstone on her, and it's okay. I think Shirelius has a higher win rate, though. It's very close. It's very close. But Moonstone is good if you're going to go for... I think if you're going for, like, a Redemption or an Ardent Censer or something like that, I like Moonstone. but you may not be getting the most out of it, right? If you're just going to go for Putrefier, which is still an extremely good item. I think it's the best Grievous Wound item out there, and you probably want your support buying the Grievous Wound so your carries don't have to. And there's still a lot of champions out there that heal that are really problematic. So if you're going to have to get Putrefier in a game, I'm not completely convinced that Moonstone is the way to go, just because you're not getting any extra plus healing and shielding on your second item. And so you're kind of wasting a lot of the potential of the Moonstone. She also doesn't have that much plus healing and shielding. Or like any healing and shielding, right? All she has is her W, and it's on a really long cooldown. So yes, it's like good, but it's not like Sona where you're spamming it, every couple of seconds. So I tend to like Shurelya's a little bit more if you're going Putrefier. If you do want to go for Redemption for like some supreme team fighting power, or if you want to try some of the new technology like a Rylai's. Rylai's has been pretty popular too because it applies the slow on your E or on your Q, so that when you hit somebody with the Q, then you're going to stun them with the E. Now, if you throw 2 E's, you're probably going to stun them anyways if you hit them. So it's really just for those situations where you're opening up with your Q and then you hit them with an E to sort of chain that together. But that's something people have been playing around with. It does give you a little bit more utility, but it doesn't really do a lot to help your team. And again, if you're just timing it to throw your double E's anyways, you're not getting as much benefit out of it. So it does have a good win rate though. And I'm really not that much of a fan of tier. Again, it's not doing a lot for your team. You don't really have mana problems, and your cooldowns are kind of longer, right? So it's not like Sona where everything's like a 4-second cooldown. So I really think that just sticking with probably like a Shurelya's into something like Putrefier or Staff of Flowing Water, Ardent Censer, something like that is probably the way to go in most situations. But either way, scales pretty well, very impressive in the laning phase. Obviously, really good layering of CC with your R plus your E stun is going to work really well with a lot of comps out there, particularly something like a Jhin in the laning phase. It's so much CC and so much damage. And she's going to be solid. Now, a lot of people have been going back to the Guardian build before people were trying out the Glacial Augment build, and that was pretty good too, because you can apply that stun, right, with your double E or with your ultimate. Having that Glacial down just gives you a little bit more capabilities in terms of how you want to kite. But the Guardian protects you personally, right, versus Glacial's never going to protect you personally. So it's just a lot better against burst. It's a lot better if you get into weird situations. And either way, you probably want Revitalized Font. You definitely want Font if you're going to do Ardent Censer or Staff of Flowing Water. But either way, I think Seraphine's really good right now. There are several different builds that can be strong. Pretty good scaling, very oppressive, really oppressive with stuff like Senna too, like Seraphine, Senna, for just like the ultimate kind of poke scaling lane is really obnoxious. Okay, Rakan. I know several people on the channel disagree with me about Rakan, but I still think he's a top tier champion. What it comes down to with Rakan is he's one of the hardest supports in the game to fully optimize because you have so many choices, both in how you rune, how you itemize him, how you want to play him in a fight, just sort of theoretically, and then actually executing on that, sequencing your abilities in the correct order, dodging skill shots, because CC interrupts everything that you do, unlike a lot of engaged supports that can still get on you. Like Nautilus, if Nautilus hits you with a hook, or Leona hits you with her E, and you try to CC them, they're still going to lock you up for some period of time. But if Rakan gets CC'd when he goes in with his W, you get nothing, and it's a really long cooldown, and it really sucks. So, you've got to be able to play around that. So, he's really hard to play, but if you do play him well, I think he's probably the best support. He's like right up there with Renata. So, it just depends on how you want to evaluate that, right? If you want to say, okay, well, he's hard to play, so the vast majority of players can't play him, so therefore I'm going to put him in C tier, right? Like, some people are going to take that approach. Other people will take the approach, well, he has the potential to be really strong if played well. He's performing really well at kind of, all levels of play, especially higher levels of play. And he has the toolkit. Like, that's the thing with Rakan, is whenever I play him, it just feels like you have the answers. You just have to figure out how to unlock them, right? Like, he's got almost everything you could want. He's got Engage, really good Engage with his W. that can, go through most stuff trying to block him. You have 4 seconds with your R to juke a lot of CC. You can even R and then flash on someone to get that sort of guaranteed engage. You can R to catch up to people, to save your allies really well. There's just a lot of different geometry and sequences of events you can do with Rakan that you just can't do with other champions. And so I like him particularly because he does have like really long range engage because of just how much gap you, especially if someone else jumps in, like these other divers, the Wukong, the Volibear and stuff like that, and you can press your R and then follow up with your E. He is an awesome follow-up engage. Like, so he can engage himself, but he's even better if you have another engage on your team, and then you can run in and follow up. So just like insane gap closing capabilities. And if your team doesn't go in, particularly in the laning phase, if you're trying to trade, usually you can get back out with your E. So you can go in, W, get a trade, knock them up, Q them, and then E back out for just a really quick trade. Now, sometimes your teammates will troll you, and they will not give you the E jump back out, and that feels really bad. But at least he has the option to do those types of trades, right? If you're playing a Leona or a Nautilus, you really can't do that too often, or it's a lot harder to go in, take a light trade, just hit him a little bit, and walk back out without taking too much damage, right? So he's not as all in as some of these other champs, and he protects really well. So he has 150 shield per application, right? So each one of these E's is basically going to be a 300 shield effectively with a 1.4 AP ratio, right? 140%. So that's a big shield, especially like I just said, the Janna shield's getting nerfed, Lulu's getting nerfed, Karma's getting nerfed. Like, everybody's getting nerfed except for Rakan. Rakan got buffed a couple of patches ago. And his sustain in lane is actually, like, pretty reasonable, right? Around level 3 or 4, you're probably healing for, like, 50 for you and your ally and doing okay damage. So that's okay sustain. That's about the same amount of sustain as, like a Sona W, just healing 2 people, but it's a lot less mana early on, and it does a little bit of damage. So his sustain in lane is pretty decent. You also have the E, to protect your ally if they're taking some damage, and then you have your passive shield as well. So he's actually reasonably durable against poke. He's not the best in the world if, you've just got Misfortune and Xerath constantly raining nonsense on you. It will add up, right? But compared to something like Nautilus or Leona, he's going to hold up a lot better in those situations than they will. It's because, again, you've got the passive shield, you have your Q, you can take stuff like Second Wind, Guardian. You have a lot of different options to kind of help you make it through that. But yeah, extremely versatile, really good itemization. Again, one of the best Shurelya's, if not the best Shurelya's user in the game. Guardian is what a lot of people are still taking. It's really good, but there are some top ends Rakan players like Feather Daddy who are taking Glacial Augment, which can be good in certain situations. And then secondary items, you just have so many choices. He has more choices than almost anybody. You can go for the Putrefier, classic, very good. As I said before, this is the best Grievous Wound item in the game. It's only 2,300 gold, and the support can get it, so your carries can keep getting their carry items. So that's a really huge boon to any support that can get that. And then you can go for Zeke's if you want a little bit of tankiness, but you also want to help your AD carry or your Master Yi or whatever, just do more damage to get through the tanks. You have Knight's Vow, which is one of my favorites in a lot of situations. If you have someone a carry that's really fed, particularly someone who has a lot of durability, something like Red Cane, something like Volibear, Wukong, these types of champs where if they don't kill them, they're just going to like 1v9 hard carry because they have so much sustain, resistances, all that stuff. Knight's Vow is great. That just says, look, you're never going to kill this hard carry. Between Knight's Vow, Guardian, my shielding, and CC and all this stuff, you can protect people super well. It just takes assassins out of the game. If there's a Zed, in a lot of situations, even squishy targets on your team, if you have Guardian up, Knight's Vow on them, and you've got your shield, and your ult's ready, it's really, really hard for someone to get picked on your team. So I really like those items. You can do Redemption. If you want to double down on your team fight, that can work. I don't get this a lot on Rakan, but it can work. Mikhail's is really underrated. A lot of people don't get that, but particularly if they have a lot of magic damage on their team, people forget that has 50 magic resist on it. So that's a pretty legit item. And just being able to cleanse stuff like a Lux Bind or Morgana Bind, stuff. Ash Arrow. Ash is a big one where I will, if they have like, 2 magic damage users on their team and an Ash, sometimes I'll get Mikhail's just for the Ash Arrow. Now, a lot of times, like your ADC will take cleanse against Ash, but, it can still be really useful. So Mikhail's, if you use it correctly, is really underrated and really strong in specific situations. I will say I'm not a big fan of Frozen Heart. People on stream are always telling me to get this item. It just, you don't need to pay that much gold for the mana, right? Like you're paying like 500 or 600 gold for the mana. The attack speed is nice if you stay in range, but like Rakan wants to get out of range pretty quickly in a lot of scenarios. So it just feels really awkward to buy. Like getting the Glacial is like okay. It does reduce some of your incoming damage, but I just don't. I think the item is good on certain champions. I just don't think Rakan is one of those champions. And then people tell me about Anathema sometimes. Maybe situationally it can be okay, but again, these are like really, really fringe picks at that point. Hourglass is another one that's like fringe. If you're going for a glacial build and you've already got the stopwatch, then your Hourglass is only going to cost you 2350 gold. So at that point, like maybe that does allow you to dive. It is good in certain situations. But I would probably rather do stuff that helps your team a lot more. Namely, a lot of times it's just going to be Putrefier, Zeke's, or Knight's Vow in a lot of situations. But you can also go stuff like Staff of Flowing Water, Ardent Censer, particularly if there are multiple champions on your team that are going to benefit from the attack speed and the on-hit damage, then Ardent Censer can be pretty good. You just got to remember that you're going to be really squishy if you go for these like utility items like Ardent Censer, Staff of Flowing Water, Redemption. You're probably going to get blown up. Even Putrefier, you got to be really careful because it has no defensive stats on it. So there's a big difference. And if you have Putrefier, if you're dying in a team fight, or if you have, Zeke's. Another thing that I've been trying recently, Shirelia's is incredibly strong, but I have seen Zazel has lately been running this item, the Even Shroud, and I think like the extra percentage damage is very nice, and the extra resistances are very nice. Locket was nerfed pretty substantially on its shield a few patches ago, but this gives you the defense, and it also gives you some offense to that 9%. Now, one thing that's nice about this is if you are immobilized, so if someone stuns you when you're going in for your Q or your E or whatever, that person gets debuffed, and everyone around that person, I don't know what the range is, but everyone still gets debuffed. So even if you get CC'd in a fight, even if your W gets stuffed, right, you're running at them with your R, you try to W in and hit the luck, she binds you with her Q or whatever, like that sucks because that just wastes like all of your cooldowns to get her, but now she's at least going to get the debuff on her. So if your Volibear and Wukong still get on top of her, they're still getting enhanced damage. So it just adds an extra layer of utility in fights, like guaranteed power in a fight, even if you get CC'd. And then obviously if you do CC them, then they still get the 9%. But even if they CC you, even if you screw up, then it's still going to provide some power. So I think that might be part of what's going on there. I'm not entirely sure because I haven't seen a lot of people doing it, but Zazel had like almost an 80% win rate running that. He's been doing that a lot. So we'll see. I've been testing it out. Seems pretty interesting. It is nice to be a little bit tankier on Rakan. You can make more aggressive plays and not get blown up in team fights. Some people go for the Relentless Hunter as well. I'm not sure about that. I think Ulti Hunter it just feels so good if you're like proactively making plays. But Relentless is good, particularly if you want to roam around a little bit more. So there are lots of high-end Rakan players. And like I said, Feather Daddy, does like a totally different build. And they're both very successful, right? Like Feather Daddy's probably the most well-known NA one-trick. And, he likes to go for this Glacial Augment plus Ulti Hunter, and he goes for a more traditional, like, Shirelia's utility type of package. So, Shirelia's plus Putrefier. But anyways, I spent enough time on Rakan. Want to keep going. Want to make sure we get everybody. We see Rakan every night. If you want to see Rakan or talk about Rakan, you can definitely do that on stream anytime you want. But I just wanted to share that because those are just a couple of new things people have been messing around with, especially the Even Shroud. Okay, Senna did get nerfed a few patches ago. I think they reduced her slow from like 20% to 15% or something. She's still very strong, I think. Now, her win rate did go down. She's like 51%. The thing with Senna is she is very lane dominant. She's going to have nice scaling, but she is very vulnerable to flanks. I don't know. I've never found a lot of success on her. I have tried her. She is very fun to play. She does scale, and I lose to Senna a lot. That's my worst matchup as Rakan, or certainly one of them. It's one of the most popular matchups I've played, and I've only got like a 40% win rate. I only have a losing win rate, I think, against 3 champions consistently, where there's like a decent sample size, and that's Senna, Nautilus, and Brand right now. Some of the stuff like Morgana that people think is good against Rakan, I've got like a 70-something% win rate against them, so that's not as good as people think it is. But Senna's very good in that. And I think that she's good into a lot of enchanters as well, because they can't really like pressure you early, and you scale too. That's the thing. It's like enchanters typically outscale most other types of supports in the game because of the way that plus healing and shielding stacks multiplicatively with AP, with Font of Life, with Moonstone, all of this stuff, and with resistances, right? So I've done plenty of videos on this in the past, but basically, you know, if someone has 100 armor to do 100 damage to that person, you actually have to do 200 damage to that person, right? And then it gets reduced by 50%, and then they take 100, right? So when you heal somebody for 100 who has 100 armor, if someone's doing physical damage to them, they have to do 200 damage to cancel out your 100 heal. That's a super simplified state, right? Like, that's not including armor pen and, you know, everything else. But that's just the concept, is when people have more resistances, heals and shields are way, way stronger. That's why it's toxic as hell that you put, like, lots of HP and other resistances on items, on 4 hard carries that also heal them for a lot. Like Gore Drinker, and especially Death's Dance. That's a whole different conversation, but that's why those items are so freaking toxic, is when you put those on things like Wukong and Volibear, and they do really high damage, but they also have really high sustain and high resistances. There's just not a lot you can do about that, because the scaling is just extreme. But that's why enchanters are really strong. So, is because of the scaling that's in the game right now, and particularly because those types of champions are meta, right? Where you have these like unkillable bruisers that, especially if you're giving them shields, they're going to be really hard to kill. So Senna kind of counteracts that a little bit because she can pressure, she has really long range, she has very good trading, very good sustain in the laning phase. A lot of people go for fleet so that you're able to walk up whenever you land your Q on somebody and then auto attack them, you know, get that hit, heal, and run away before they can really trade back with you. And then you just keep doing that over and over again. And just keep pushing the lane in, keep harassing. And your main goal, the harassment's good, but you're just trying to get as many souls as you possibly can in the laning phase. And I know they've nerfed the souls over time. They used to be worth about 50 gold per soul. I don't know mathematically what they're worth right now, but they are worth a lot. They're worth so much that you see a strategy in Pro, if you don't follow Pro too much, where people will play a Senna ADC, but they call it fasting Senna because they don't actually CS for a long portion of the game, because they would rather get the souls, because the souls are just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the actual CS. So they'll give the CS to like their support, and their support, Tom Kench is the most common one, but there can be other supports too that will actually take the CS. Like, that's when you know a mechanic is broken, when it is more valuable not to do something you're supposed to do as that role, like CS, and it's more valuable to ignore that and just hit the enemy. So support Senna in solo queue is almost the same thing, right? You just don't have the same type of strategy with it, but it can be very similar. So you're just trying to stack up as many souls as you can. She's got a Q for sustain in the lane. She has a W, which pairs really well with like a Gen W or a Misfortune E or just any other type of CC someone has. Really good push early, and then a global ult that can, you know, influence other lanes. So really strong now. So what's the problem with her then? Well, and I have her S, so there's not that much of a problem with her. Let's be honest about that. But she can be flanked. She doesn't have any dashes, so she does have her E to help her escape. But all that she really has to get away, she does take Boots of Swiftness. She has Fleet, and she has her Q. So she has some slows. She has some movement speed. But if she's getting flanked, especially early on, if she's getting ganked, she's gonna die. Like there's basically no escape. So that can be problematic. She doesn't have a ton of CC. So, yes, your W can hit people, a delay, and then they're going to be rooted. Now, 2 seconds is definitely something to think about. But she doesn't bring a lot of CC. So there's that too. So in a team fight, if the fight's over pretty quickly, if everyone's just running in, dropping all of their large cooldowns, and your team's just getting like chain CC'd, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do about that. So she's really just almost like Caitlyn-esque in a laning phase, in the sense where you just want to push them in and just try to get as much advantage in that laning phase as you possibly can, and then try to snowball your lead as much as you can early on. Now, she does take Umbral, or she can take Umbral, which is really, really good for vision control later on in the game. It is hard for her to establish vision because, again, if you get caught out, you're probably dead. You don't have a lot of escapes. If you can hit the jungler with your W, and then, Q them, auto-attack them, get the movement speed, get the fleet, like, you can probably get away with, like, your E for most junglers. So, she's not as much of a sitting duck as something like a Soraka, probably, but, it still is kind of hard to establish vision control. But Umbral does help you out with that. And then if you can eventually get a couple of items and you get to like 80 to 100 souls in the mid to late game, you can just do a ton of damage if you have the proper protection. So you're basically another ADC at that point that has like some utility, but you're mostly just trying to hang out on the back line and just blast people. So if you really need that extra damage, I think she's probably the best like damage oriented, low utility but high damage support champion in the game, just because so much of it is virtually guaranteed if you just lane aggressively. Just make sure you don't get ganked, track the jungler well, invest in some early pink wards, try to get that vision down. But if you just get to do your thing in the lane, if people just don't mess with you, it's a problem. You're gonna win the lane, and then you're gonna have a lot of souls, and then once you get a lot of souls, they have to account for that. Like, they have to spend a lot of resources to kill you in team fights, or you're just going to kill everybody. So you become another carry at that point, and that really taxes enemy resources quite a bit. So that, like, she's pretty good against Rakan because you can suppress Rakan, keep him pushed into the tower. It's constantly apply that harassment, especially, again, if she's with someone else, like a Janna or a Misfortune or something else. You just can't really do anything against her. And it's really hard to land your W as Rakan too, because she takes Swifties and she gets that extra movement speed from Fleet and stuff like that, and she just has long range. So it's just really hard to get on her. Now, I will say one of the worst matchups I've ever played in League of Legends is like Pyke against her, because Pyke, if he hits you with a hook, you're probably dead. And I would imagine Blitz is really obnoxious too, but Pyke in particular, just because he can go around invisible, he's really good at flanking, he can roam. It's really hard for Senna to roam too. She has her ult, but she just doesn't move very quickly. So, anyways, that's a bad matchup. Something like Blitzcrank's probably a bad matchup too. So she does have some bad matchups, but if it's an enchanter or just something else that's just going to let you sit there and push in and just blast them, she's going to be pretty good. Okay. Next few here, and I'll try to move it a little bit faster. We've got Janna. Janna's still good. She has been nerfed quite a bit over the last couple of patches, and she is getting nerfed again next patch. But she's still very good at peeling. So you got to respect it. If you have... That's why I don't have her in S, is I don't necessarily recommend her as a blind pick, but she is probably one of the best if you have a hyper carry on your team. Like a Jinx, Kog'Maw, probably plays really well with Sivir too. Like early on, you could... If you're not being pressured, you could charge up your tornado, just throw it through all the minions, and then Sivir just does her thing and blows them all up. Because you do have, like, in the first few levels, like, you have pretty good push. You just have to make sure they're not going to engage on you and kill you while you're doing that. But that's, like, okay early on. And then outside of that, she's really fast. Like, with her W, they have nerfed it, but she does have really good movement speed, so she does roam better than most enchanters. And she does have really good self-peel as well with her Tornado, especially if you take Glacial Augment, which everybody does these days. Glacial Augment plus that Tornado just gets you out of, like, everything, pretty much. So, if any jungler is coming up while you're trying to ward, you just hit them with that Tornado and you're gone, And if somehow they flash it or still want to try to get you, you can pop your ult and still get out. So it's just really, really hard to catch Janna. And she puts up some really nice buffs as well. That shield not only is a good shield, but it ends up giving you like 50 AD or so. So that scales not only with 80 carries, but any sort of bruiser or even assassins that rely on AD can be really strong. So you put that shield on a Wukong before he goes in, he's going to blast everybody. Hi, Roy. How are you?
I'm not Thursday at home day.
Oh, you like the stay at home day. Okay. You want to go in the clubhouse for a little bit? That sounds fun. So yeah.
I'm going to go downstairs.
Okay. All right. I'll see you in a little bit. Okay. So yeah, I still think she's good. The problem with Janna is a lot of her stuff is single target. Obviously her ult can heal multiple people, but her shield, the extra AD that she gives is single target. Her W slow is single target. The Tornado, in theory, could hit multiple people, but realistically, it's going to hit one person for single target. So a lot of her power is single target, except for the ultimate, and it buffs up one teammate pretty well with the AD, as long as the shield lasts. But she is kind of the queen of anti-dive. Like, she's very good at peeling most other champions back. Although Riot has been eroding just how strong that is, because there's so many champs that have, like, mechanics that can get around her ult. So, like, Hecarim, he charges in with his R, your R does not stop it. Volibear, he jumps in on somebody, your R does not stop that. So, like, Shyvana dragons in or whatever, doesn't stop it. So, there are a lot of different mechanics that have been introduced in the game, or just so many dashes, right? You try to hit Echo with your Tornado, he jumps around 50 million times and dodges it. So she is still good. She does have a high win rate, like 53%, but I personally would not blind pick her. I would only blind pick her if you know you have superior scaling on your team and all you have to do is protect your backline and you win. Then I think she's pretty good. Everything else is pretty much the same on her. You have your choice of Shirelias or Moonstone. She can be good with either, depending on if you want to be more aggressive or if you're planning on longer fights for healing. And then you have your Ardent Censer, Redemption, Staff of Flowing Water, Putrefier choices after that. Okay, Sona I think is still pretty good. They have nerfed her multiple times. She still has like a 53% win rate. Now, Sona is nice if you're not going to be pressured in lane. So I think that she, kind of like Senna, I think that she's pretty good against other enchanters, and particularly if you have another pressure lane, right? So if you have like a Misfortune, Caitlyn, Sivir, whatever, she's going to work really well with that. So that's just going to let you just walk up, just constantly hit them with your Qs. It's guaranteed Frost procs, guaranteed Airy procs. You don't really take Scorch these days, I don't think. But you just get all of your procs. So, and you get the procs, working towards her passive, so you get the reduced cooldown on your abilities and all that good stuff. So it's just really easy to farm procs, just provide some light harassment in the laning phase. If you can land the auto attacks, great. If you can't, whatever, you can still just keep spamming that Q. And then she has a little bit of an unusual build where you get tier, and the tier early on just allows you to keep spamming all of your abilities because you have really low cooldown on your stuff. It's going to give you more sustain with your W. It's going to give you more procs with your Q. Now, I had been maxing W, but I, listened to Sneaky on a stream. I don't remember when it was. It was a while ago. But he made a really good point that, like, mathematically, the W has been nerfed so much that the Q just provides a lot more power and utility for your team. So I think most people are on that Q max again. And outside of tier, you can go Moonstone. It's another one where Shirelias or Moonstone are both really good. Longer fights, Moonstone. But Shirelias is pretty nice too because you have other ways to amplify your speed with the E to move your team around. And then you can keep applying that extra 25% movement speed by spamming your other auras as well in team fights. So Shirelias is quite good also. Now, whether you actually complete your Seraph's Embrace is debatable. I see some people completing it. Some people, will just leave it at tier and get a second item as well. So like maybe they leave the tier and then they get a Putrefier second, or an Ardent Censer second, Staff of Flowing Water second, something like that. It probably just kind of depends on the matchup. Sorry, I just got out of the pool a little while ago. Haven't hopped in the shower yet. So my hair's interesting, but anyways, good. Still hyper scaling champion. Lots of good utility. You guys be very careful though, because you can get blown up. Her range is much closer than Seraphine, so it's a lot riskier to take her into engage champs. But she provides, I feel like, much more sustained buffs for your allies than Seraphine. But her ult, it's mostly just the range is a lot lower on all of her abilities, and her wave clear is a lot lower early on too. But she can be good if you get the proper protection. Now Taric, Taric's a very interesting one, and I might pull up the Taric here because not a lot changed with Janna and Sona. Taric though actually has a high win rate. His play rate is not like amazing, but it's also not like absurdly low either. So it's like 2%. He's got almost a 54% win rate. Now I have seen him. Most of the one tricks that I've seen are like the people who play him a lot at the top end tend to play him in the jungle and the top more. But you can go. People are starting to do like a little bit of glacial, which is gonna let like that slow is gonna allow you to stick to people a little bit more and land more of your auto attacks, get your cooldowns, all that good stuff. But I think more people have been trying out this Shirelia's, and this is something that I theorized, I think, when I was on a Taric kick 1 or 2 weeks ago, where I played him for, I don't know, almost an entire stream, like 3 or 4 games on him, and I didn't do so well with him. He feels strong sometimes, but like a lot of enchanters, it just feels like you have a hard time forcing a fight, right? So you don't have any speed ups, but if you can hold him there and force a fight, then you know, obviously, like, your ultimate's going to be a lot more powerful if everyone's grouped up. Your Q is more powerful. Your stun's more powerful, all that. So you want to be able to force team fights and hold people together. So Shirelia's does allow you to do that. You're just going to be a lot squishier. So I'd really have to see how people are trying to navigate that. But that was something that I always thought, if you could just find a way to get away with doing Shirelia's. But if you're doing Glacial and Shirelia's, it feels like you're going to be, like, turbo squishy. But maybe that's not the case. You know, maybe he's tankier than it seems. But that is interesting. And then some people have been trying out Tier as well into Winter's Approach. I'm not sure, because if you look at the win rates, though, it's like one of the lowest win rate items. I know it's cute to do something like Winter's Approach, but honestly, like, you're going to get better results out of Knight's Vow or Zeke's, at least statistically, or even Redemption in a lot of situations. So I don't know. I mean, maybe just going for... Now, they don't have it here, but I have been seeing some Tarics do, like, Presence of Mind and just, like, the Triumph...
A more intelligently
Presence of Mind
world
and the
leads to a
Tenacity
brighter
one.
Future. At Qualcomm, we're
But
creating technology
I
solutions
feel like if
to
you're
take
going to
on
go
some of the
Shirelia's,
world's
that you probably
biggest
want Guardian,
challenges.
and then you probably want
See
the
us, where 5G and
Presence of
AI help
Mind.
bring individualized
Maybe
learning
Presence
to
is
students
enough,
no
or
matter
maybe you could
where
just
they
sit
are.
on Tier.
And where 5G
I don't know.
and AI
There are a lot of
help
different
enable
options with Taric, but I do
personalized
like
healthcare for
the
more
idea of
patients
trying to
so
get
they can get the
Shirelia's,
care they
because
need.
that fixes like his
Join us
biggest
in
problem.
creating
That
a
allows you
world
to
that
run
is
in
more
with your team,
intelligently
press your
connected.
ultimate, and just hopefully be able to force a fight. You know, increase the probability you're going to be able to land your stun. It just seems really good. The problem is you don't want to get blown up. Now, the big thing with Taric for me is it's just like you have no mobility, right? So people can dodge a lot of your stuff really easily, and if the fight starts going south, you're dead, right? You're not going to get away. Or if you get ganked while you're trying to rotate through the river, you're going to die. You get flanked in lane for a creative gank or something like that, you're going to die. So it just seems like there's a lot of situations where if stuff's going south, you're just going to feed. And it's going to be really hard not to do that. So he feels like he's a really good win more champion, or if your team has a really good comp already, you've got Wukong or Volibear, just something else that can go in and you can follow up. You know, it feels like that could be good. Or you've got like a Fed Master Yi and you just ult him and you win, right? Like the classic Taric-y, but I don't know. Maybe that's not fair. Like, he does have, like, okay sustain, sort of. It's a pretty weak heal early on, but with tier, like, you could trigger it a lot. I don't know. He does have a really high win rate, so I put him up here out of respect. I did have him here last patch. I predicted he would be pretty good on this patch, but I don't know. Like I said, I haven't personally found the success, but the win rate's there, the play rate's shaky, but I think it was enough to say, you know, if you can figure out how to do it right, I think he can be a strong champ. Now, Yuumi is another one who's really popular right now. Her win rate's not that great, but, I mean, win rates aren't everything. It's something, but it's not everything. But, like, you know, kind of like Rakan, she's got about a 50% win rate. But I feel like the ceiling with Yuumi is just huge, right? Like, if you get in a situation where someone on your team gets turbo fed, and then they just have a Yuumi attached to them, it just feels like you can't win. It is so hard to deal with her. They've nerfed her heal like 1 billion times, but that's not even like the biggest thing. It's just like you can't target her, and she has this huge ultimate that just like stops anyone from doing anything for like 3 seconds, because it not only can root you for 1.75, but it lasts for so freaking long. Like, as Rakan, I have to sit there and wait on that Yuumi ult for like 3 seconds. It might as well be a 3-second stun on me, because I can't move around in that huge ass area, that dead zone she creates whenever she ults. Now, I do have a high win rate against Yuumi as Rakan, but it's still, that ult is so obnoxious, and you can't CC her out of it because she's attached to somebody, so you can't shut her up. You just have to let her do it. So that's annoying. And then it's also just that she gives the attack speed, the movement speed, and the extra like AD or AP, you know, that she buffs people with. So she just is one of the queens of just buffing up people and just doing like crazy team fights. So her numbers are low though, right? Like, I personally beat her a lot in solo queue. She's got a 50% win rate. In pro, I think it's like really low. It's like a 17% win rate or something. But people still play it. So I don't know. She has the potential. She does get to cheat on her items too, which is nice because you don't have to buy boots. That saves you 950 gold off your Ionians, which means you can either get Moonstone or Shirelia's. Both are good choices. With her, even more. So yeah, I mean, if you can get out of the laning phase and you can attach to somebody and just hard carry a game, she can be really good. She is horrible at roaming, probably one of the worst roaming champs in the game because she's not going to have boots and she's super squishy. And she probably has some of the worst vision control, if not the worst, of any support. Because, again, you can't really go do vision by yourself or you're going to die, right? She's like the most vulnerable champ in the game. She's caught out in the open. So she's extreme, right? If you get ganked and the person that you're attached to dies, you're probably going to die. You can abandon ship and try to run away, and sometimes that works, but you're probably going down with the ship in a lot of situations. So, again, she's like the ultimate win more champ. You can't really make plays by yourself. You don't have vision. You can't roam. You're probably going to die if someone else dies. But if you attach to someone who's really fed, it makes it almost impossible to deal with that champion in a lot of situations because she has something for everybody. I mean, like I said, movement speed, attack speed, flat AD, flat AP, lots of CC with her ultimate, a homing missile slow with her Q, really strong items because she basically gets a free almost 1,000 gold just for playing Yuumi at the start of the game. So, anyways, or I guess not at the start of the game, right? But towards her first mythic, effectively. But yeah, super strong. We've only got a few minutes left, so I'll just kind of cut to some of the more interesting ones. Lulu, about the same. Not a lot changed there. I think she's great with Kog'Maw, who is still quite strong. You could maybe consider her with something like Jinx. Just kind of like Janna, where if you have a hyper carry on your team, she's going to be a good pick. The main thing is she buffs up single targets a lot more than Janna does with the extra movement speed, the attack speed. The difference with Renata, between her and Renata, and why I have her lower than Renata, first of all, Renata has an engage with her Q. She has a much stronger teamfight ultimate with her R, and I think her W is, in a lot of situations, stronger than Lulu's W, because it also has the resurrection, and I think it has higher base attack speed. So why Lulu then? Well, Lulu buffs up single target damage a lot more. And yes, she doesn't have as high of attack speed, but you got to remember when you put picks on people with that shield, then it's also an extra like 80 on attack damage because of your passive and how much that's doing, not including like the AP scaling. So it's a lot. It's a lot of damage. So if you put it on someone who has high attack speed, something like a Cogmaw specifically, but could be Twitch also, that's really good. And you're really good at protecting single targets with your Polymorph, which just shuts down assassins, and your ultimate. So it makes it really, really hard to kill that one person you're protecting, and you can also buff up that one person to do a ton of damage, versus Renata is much more versatile. So yeah, Lulu's still good, but only with certain matchups, I think. Ashe is another one. I really don't like to do it, but I feel like I have to put it up here in tier 2. The win rate's not insane, but man, that champion just, she only does really one thing late game, but it's a good thing to do. Her ultimate ends up being like a 30-second cooldown or something. She just spams R over and over again. If she hits somebody, they're probably going to die. She's got slow. She'll take mandate a lot of times, so she gives just perma slows and extra movement speed buffs to people. She's really annoying in the laning phase with spamming her W over and over and over again. She does have Hawk Shot, which is really nice for like scouting the enemy jungle. So she has like a decent amount of utility. She's just very squishy. You can get flanked and blown up and just like chain feed a ton late game. You're probably gonna die a lot. She doesn't do that much damage late game, especially compared to something like Senna. She's not going to do any damage, right? It's basically just for the slows, just for your ultimate, really. So if that ult has a lot of value, if the enemy has a lot of squishy champs that are immobile, they don't take cleanse, they don't get Mikhails, they don't get Banshees or any other type of CC shield type of things, then she can be pretty good. And in the laning phase, you know, she's annoying. Like, if you pair her with Senna or with Misfortune or anything else, like, you can just keep poking people over and over again. She can get an Umbral. I don't know if that's super common on her. I don't think it is. But if you do get Umbral, that does help you out with vision control. So she's kind of gimmicky. Like, lane-dominant champ that doesn't scale super well. But that ultimate is really good, right? If you land that, you know, consistently on people, you can take over a game with it. So gotta respect it. I've seen it. I've lost to it a decent chunk, even though I'm just like, man, this is so stupid. We shouldn't be losing this game. We still lose it sometimes. So people have been playing her more. Again, not an insane win rate. It's like 51%, but it is unique, and I think it is actually legit in some circumstances. Swain is another one. I haven't played against a Swain support a ton, but I think he's really good. Now, one change they did make on this patch, which helps out Swain, Brand, and Zyra, because we're running out of time here, is now the masks can stack. I mentioned that earlier in the video, but you can have multiple Demonics, multiple Leandries on your team, and they will all stack together. So that benefits Swain greatly. He's really tanky. He does a lot of damage. That ultimate is just stupid now. Like, he just basically heals forever. Particularly if no one else on your team has any healing, he's a really good choice, because they're going to have to get Grievous Wounds just for him, and that's going to mean they're not buying other stuff out there. So anytime you can force somebody to buy Grievous when otherwise they wouldn't have to, that's a huge opportunity cost for the enemy team to try to deal with you. So he has a lot of kill pressure early with stuff like Draven, like Jhin, just other Tristana, other high damage champs, and then he's a reasonable disruptor late game. He doesn't have a lot of CC late game. If you do take Rylai's on him, which has been increasingly more popular, that is an AoE slow, and it does allow you to stick to people a lot more. So that can be pretty good. But there's a lot of items that he wants, right? Like, you've got Rylai's, you've got Zanya's is really good on him. Of course, you've got Demonic, Leandries, a lot of options. So I'm not entirely sure what the best one is in different situations, but he has choices. If you need someone who is kind of a disruptor, tank, AP threat, he can be a pretty good choice. So again, light on the CC, but it's a pretty reasonable CC. It is really hard to deal with it, because it just goes through a lot of stuff and you just rip people back. Okay, Brand is pretty good if they have a lot of melee that's grouping up. Obviously, he can apply pressure in lane. The double mask is really strong. In team fights, he's going to do a ton of damage. I do like him a little bit more than Zyra right now, just the way the numbers are kind of fleshing out. His cooldowns are a lot lower than Zyra's, but Zyra is still really good if you can pressure in the laning phase, make really good use of that ult. Zyra's a very good sort of anti-dive champ, and Brand is more of like if they just have a bunch of melees that are stacked up. It's going to be pretty good. Amumu didn't quite pan out as much as I was hoping. You can do a lot of damage early, but it just feels like hard engaged champs like Leona, Nautilus, and Amumu, stuff like that, are still having a little bit of a hard time with the exception of Rakan. But again, a lot of that's because he can go in and get out. I think that's basically it. AP Shaco, they buffed his boxes a patch or two ago. He's actually like okay, but you have to play him really, really well. I still wouldn't put him like absolute top, but I have seen some Shakos, like AP Shakos, that are really obnoxious. So it definitely can work if you want to try something a little weird. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Come by, check out the stream, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.